Test Drive 6 would be the final entry in the series that was released on the PlayStation between 1999 and 2000, which would also see ports to the Sega Dreamcast, Windows PC, and even a version on the Nintendo Game Boy Color. It would also be developed by Pitbull Syndicate, but would also be released by different publishers depending on the region that it was in. And this game gave you access to 37 licensed cars, plus 4 variants of police cars. And like typical fashion in previous Test Drive games, would also receive a very cool soundtrack, this time around mixing techno with rock and vice versa. If one thing the Test Drive games were renowned for was their music tracks, very like some of the other racing games that were seen on the console at the time. Now, while the Test Drive games were never considered as the most popular on these consoles, they were popular enough to keep making sequels that did way back even in the early days of the likes of the PC. And even today, the Test Drive games are still being developed. Now they're a lot more budget heavy, they're more open world racers, but they still use the Test Drive name, which is very cool. Now, these games wouldn't have been as well refined. They did have very fast paced, frantic gameplay, like I said, great use of music and soundtracks, but they would have been very tough and frustrating, and wouldn't have appealed to all types of players or even fans of racing games, because they would have been just very fiddly in terms of the controls. They always had like cheap and unbalanced AI systems and control methods. Now, this game did improve over Test Drive 4 and even Test Drive 5, which I have covered in previous videos. I'll leave a link in the description. And many would regard this to probably be the best of the 3 games that was released on the console, and that can be debatable for many. For me, I always preferred Test Drive 5. I always thought that that was the best one, and out of the 3 games, I always thought that the 5th game had the best soundtrack, hands down. For me, it's got one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a video game. But this game does give a lot more context in terms of modes and variety and features that are available, and it was heavily publicised. Like Test Drive 5, there was a lot of budget spent on the likes of the marketing and ad campaigns to get this game publicised. Like literally every magazine that you opened had an advertisement slot for this game. Even on TV, it was being heavily promoted. But even with all of the promotion, the game did, like its predecessors, received fairly average reviews across the board, but it was still considered popular enough to sell in decent numbers, which it did, like the previous games. And they were often considered as an alternative to the popular Need for Speed games. Yes, they were never as good as them, but they were still a good alternative nonetheless. Now, my first experience with Test Drive 6 wasn't on the PlayStation itself. It actually came in the form of a PC demo, funnily enough, and I didn't play the game until about 2 or 3 years later. It was in 2001. I remember getting my first PC. I was in college, and I remember gaining access to a couple of PC magazines that had demo discs, very like the way the PlayStation would have done back in the day. And I remember one of the demo CDs had a playable version of a level from Test Drive 6, and I remember figuring out how to obviously install the game and get it booted up. Now, I remember at the time I didn't have access to a controller. I had to use the keyboard setup, which was fiddly to get used to, especially for racing games. But I did manage to play it, and I liked it for what was on offer. Yes, it was very, very tricky. And yeah, the PC version, I will admit, graphically is superior to the PlayStation in every way. It's hard not to deny that. But I did go back at some stage later, and I managed to play the PlayStation version. And I have to say, it's a decent game. It's not bad at all, regardless of what the reviews say. There is some differences regarding the handling physics. There is slight tweaks to make the handling a wee bit better, and the AI is still unbalanced like it was in the previous games, but I don't think it's as bad. It didn't feel as unbearable like the original games, so there was gradual improvements across the board. Now obviously these would be later rectified with later Test Drive games and other spin-offs. It wouldn't seem to be as bad, but with these games, like, it is what it is. They're an arcade focused racer. They're better just to play in short bursts. They're actually more enjoyable if you don't take them too seriously, but there's enough replay value here that will keep you playing for a while, as there's a lot of unlockables to be had once you put put a bit of time into it, and you have enough varieties and modes that will keep you playing for a while. Frustrating, yes, and it won't be for everybody, but it definitely will appeal to a few, and I know that there are fans of this game and the series out there. With that being said, I would love to know your thoughts of Test Drive 6 for the PlayStation. What did you think of it overall, and which version or which of the versions of the games, whether it be Test Drive 4, 5 or 6, what are your favourites on the console? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around more of these racing games that were released on the PlayStation, and I'll be frank, there was loads of them, then be sure to check out this playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.